It's my pleasure to introduce you Mark Pottelar. He is Vice President of Enterprise Sourcing at Kroger. Mark, on behalf of the team, thank you very much for joining us. I know that you are a very busy person, especially in this period of time, a lot of things to do, a lot of things changing. So I'm very happy to have you over here and with our class. Just for your information, here we have undergrad class. They are from Global Supply Chain major, and we have also some special guests from MBA course, also from MKU, and Fernando from Brazil, and he's from FGV in Brazil. He's a special guest perhaps joining us. So he's interested also in this topic. So thank you very much for your time, and feel free to enjoy the group and present yourself a bit more.
Excellent. And Fernando, ¿cómo va? Fernando.
Hello, Mark.
Hey, tudo bem? Okay. So what I thought I would do, and Chris was very good about saying, cover the specific tasks that you have. And we have at Kroger what we call a 6-step sourcing process that would be somewhat familiar to some of you, maybe new to others, but also to weave in some of the things that have happened because of the COVID-19 pandemic as a result of some of the impacts of that crisis into our business. So I plan on going through that. Chris, did you have a chance to send out to the team the file?
No, I did not, but I'm gonna share with them the file you sent.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you want to share with them right now. I can have here in my.
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing. We use Microsoft Teams at work, so I'm not so familiar with using
Okay,
Zoom.
no worries. I can. Let me see.
But a little bit of introduction. So I am a 2-time graduate of Northern Kentucky University. My undergraduate is in ancient Middle Eastern history, which we can discuss maybe later if we get some time, how I ended up in sourcing. And I also have an MBA from Northern with cooperation back in those days with Xavier University, because my specialty, and that's why I speak a little bit of Portuguese, is my specialty is international business. I know working for Kroger, that's a little bit different, but I spent most of my career in international locations, not working in the US and working with people from all different cultures all over. From South Africa to Australia to China to Europe to Brazil, of course. So a little bit more about my background. I spent the first 12 years of my career at Sara Lee Corporation, which no longer exists because it was acquired by Tyson. So they are very much on the meat group side. So if you're local to Cincinnati, you would know the Conn's brand as one of the Tyson brands now. And then I spent 14 years with the automotive industry in Meritor Automotive. And that's where I got the bulk of my international experience, working overseas, living overseas, etc. And then I retired actually from Goodyear 2.5 years ago now, and took on the role at Kroger kind of as a retirement job, although right now it doesn't feel like retirement with the current crisis going on. But it's very energetic, so I can certainly say that.
And you are also member of the board.
Yes,
Yeah.
I am a member of the Supply Chain Executive Advisory Board at NKU. And, thank you for reminding me, Chris. But one of the things that we strive to do, um, and a little bit about my background there, I was on the board at Michigan State, which is the #1 supply chain school in the world. We aspire to bring NKU into that world, at least a top 10 school over the next 5 to 6 years, and really recreate, because we have so much rich supply chain experience in the Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati, Southeastern Indiana area. Whether it be TQL or all the automotive plants or whatever. There's just a tremendous wealth of experience in the Northern Kentucky area. So we aspire to bring that program to greatness as well. So with that, I will kind of launch into
If you want, I can share the.
Please.
You want me to share?
Yeah, if you don't mind. So
Can you see?
Yes,
Okay,
perfect.
wonderful.
The slide that Chris is sharing right now is really the single slide that we're going to talk from tonight, because I could probably spend 6 hours talking to it. But we'll try to constrain that to the time that we have allotted today. And really what I'll try to do is weave in where some of the COVID opportunities have expressed themselves during our current pandemic crisis. So as you see, we start with gate 0, even though we call this a 6-step process. We start with gate 0, and gate 0 is really where we set the targets and set our baseline. And by that, I mean, in a company the size of Kroger, which is a $120 billion corporation, with 2,800 locations, 41 distribution centers, 35 manufacturing facilities. And a lot of people don't really know and understand that about Kroger, that we are the 4th largest food manufacturer in the US. So really it's combining all of that volume into one, and to say, what is our savings target? And setting the baseline is sometimes difficult because of disparate systems. So Kroger, as you may or may not know, is a series of acquisitions. So you would know mainly in this area, Kroger, but in South Carolina, we go under the Harris Teeter banner. In the Northwest, we go under Fred Meyer. In Southern California, we go by QFC in Northern California, and Ralph's in Southern California. We go by Fry's in the Arizona area, the Phoenix area, if you will. We go by King Soopers in Colorado. So really an acquisition of a bunch of different brands. With that comes a lot of difficulty because you combine a bunch of different systems. So that's one of the things that we're doing right now, is consolidating our sourcing systems into one system. We have 17 different systems that we procure under today, and those vary from different systems in retail. So we have one system that is specific to the Western divisions, and one system that's specific to the Eastern divisions. But we also have 2 different systems for manufacturing, etc. So a lot of discussion goes on in setting the baseline. And that's an important task for us, because what you don't want to do is set a baseline that is incorrect. I'll give you a perfect example, and one that we are going through right now. As you can imagine, floor care is a very expensive part of our business. So we have about 80% of our stores which are concrete floors, and about 20% of our stores, which are called VCT, vinyl coated tile. So in going through some of the analysis, we wanted to make sure that we had the right baseline set. And we actually, believe it or not, discovered a $9 million error when we set the baseline. So very important to go through and set the baseline based on the best knowledge that you have at the time. Then, and probably this is the most exciting part for me, is building the fact base, the category fact base. Understanding the spend analysis, conducting the supply market analyses. And when we conduct a supply market analysis, we do what is called structure, conduct, and performance. And that's of the supply base. So how is the supply base structured? Are there only two players in some of our digital space that we utilize for our technology? Or are there, 50,000 people that do floor care? The conduct. So how do suppliers conduct themselves in doing business with the company? Are they arrogant? Are they not arrogant? Do they have a collaborative process for doing joint savings opportunities, et cetera? And then the performance. How do they perform? You might have some suppliers that are large, well-known, national branded suppliers who don't perform quite as well as some of the smaller regional players. So conducting that supply market analysis is very important for us, because you don't want to sign up and do business with someone who doesn't do a really good job. And then probably one of the things that I have brought to Kroger is identifying the list of potential suppliers. And Kroger, for the most part, is and will be a predominantly domestic supply sourced organization. By that, I mean most of our suppliers, they might be in another geography in a lower cost country, but they have US distribution. Well, one of the things that we brought into the marketplace is really taking a look at the global best practices and seeing if there is an opportunity to source from someone overseas. As an example, trash bags, someone that everyone can relate to. The best manufacturing is in Southeast Asia. It's not in China, believe it or not, which is what we would kind of call a medium cost country. But the ASEAN nations, that is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, we call ASEAN, certainly have a best practice in that area. Then we launch one of the two parts of our RFX analysis called RFI, or Request for Information. This is probably one of the most important and most contentious aspects of what we ask of our supply base, because we really are seeking information to do what is in item E, and that's build our clean sheet. And a clean sheet cost, you can call it by whatever name you want to call it. You can call it a best of the best cost. You can call it a cost, a should cost model. You can call it a clean sheet. Whatever the terminology is, it's comparing each individual supplier to what we would consider to be best in class. As an example, Vietnam, Save Africa, has probably one of the best labor costs in the world. Well, we would expect that every supplier would be able to compete with the South Vietnamese labor cost when we build up a clean sheet. So it doesn't matter where the geography is, you're really picking the best of the best and ascertaining what a supplier can do. Another example of that is what we call OEE, Original Equipment Efficiency, or Overall Equipment Efficiency. OEE is a measurement that is given if someone is manufacturing something. So it's not applicable to the service industry, but OEE can really be a key differentiator between different suppliers. You can have a supplier who has overall equipment efficiency, and to be honest, one of the best in the world is Procter & Gamble, right here in Cincinnati. Their stated OEE is 98%. So that's very much on the high side. On the lower end of the spectrum, we might have some people that are in 55 to 65% capability. Well, if you kind of take a look at OEE and measure that against someone else's OEE, that may be a key differentiator. I was on a call yesterday and a call today with our toilet paper suppliers. So to bring it very much home to the COVID crisis, you can, as you may or may not understand, toilet paper has been one of the absolute best-selling items in our stores. So we had the two key suppliers in the U.S. One is an Italian company and one is a U.S. company, both who operate in the U.S. And we were discussing their overall equipment efficiency, or OEE, measurements with them today and yesterday. And there is a wide disparity between those two players. And that really translates into lower cost. So really what Clean Sheet is about is understanding the supplier's cost probably better than the salesperson who comes in and speaks with you about it. I've seen a person maybe 2 years out of school just absolutely eviscerate a salesperson with 25 years experience because they demonstrated that they knew more about the supplier's cost than the supplier did during a negotiation. So it's very important, and we use that RFI to gather that information, such as the OEE on a product. But it's used to gather everything: transportation cost, conversion cost, which will be a function of overhead, a function of the factory cost, etc. So all of those things go into conducting what we call a very good RFI. And what that will identify is suppliers who are better than others. Then we build our clean sheet. And a clean sheet is basically the key point that we will use to identify and negotiate with suppliers based on their overall capability. Then we will do an exercise that we call design to value. Design to value. And I literally was on a call this morning or this afternoon with our design to value expert, and the guy just lives to do this. So let me explain design to value. Let's say that you have two different types of salad dressings, right? One is in a glass jar and one is in a plastic jar. They both have a plastic lid, they have different kinds of labels, and they might have different ingredients. So we use design to value to understand what the difference is in cost of a product's componentry, whether it be what's inside the package or the package itself, to identify opportunities. As an example, and I'll pull this over. this is a very inexpensive water jug, and it's made of high-density polyethylene. Well, the consumer may like this for water because they know they're getting water. But what if that ends up being canola oil or extra virgin olive oil? Doesn't really work very well in the high density polyethylene container because you can't really see the product. Even though it may be lower cost, it doesn't work so well. Then we go into phase two, which is receiving the RFI responses, and we select suppliers for RFP. So this is a somewhat subjective approach, and the reason subjectivity comes into play is that you might find a supplier filled out the RFI very well, but they have shaky financials. In other words, their financials are not that good. Someone might fill out the RFI on a very limited basis, but they're a very long-standing good supplier. That just means you need to go in and dig deeper, and they might not have answered all of the questions on the RFI because they either know what you're trying to do to conduct a supply market analysis and to develop a clean sheet, or they just may not have experienced that. Then we refine the size and prioritize DTV and other opportunities. For example, because we operate 35 manufacturing facilities, we might decide to do a make versus buy. We might decide that it's better for us to make something than to buy it. Vice versa, we might decide that it's better for us to purchase that on the outside. And this is also the area where we will do SKU rationalization. SKU, if you're not familiar, stands for stock keeping unit, and it is also the designator for different types of products in our facilities. So right now is a very, very good time for doing SKU rationalization. So if you could imagine, let's take something very simple like Clorox wipes. Clorox wipes are very, very big seller for us during the coronavirus because people are trying to wipe down everything. But you might not need lemon scented. You might not need orange scented. So some of those SKUs will get rationalized either from a sales perspective because you only have so many feet or so many linear inches to put the product on the shelf, or they might be an opportunity, as I had articulated, that has been identified during the COVID crisis. Hey, if you're going to have 8 feet of Clorox wipes, you might as well have only 2 different types. So that's one of the areas that we might take a look at. And then we develop what we call our sourcing strategy. So the sourcing strategy is really comprised of what to buy, where to buy, and how to buy and improve. So by that I mean we might decide that it is better to buy one product over another. So the what to buy is very critical. Where to buy, it may be that a product from Vietnam is 10 cents more or less expensive than a product made in the US, but you might find that 12 cents of that is consumed in working capital because you might get 90 days terms from a domestic supplier, 120-day terms from an overseas supplier, but that overseas supplier takes 6 weeks to ship to you, 2 weeks in inventory domestically to get through customs, etc. So we try to determine where to buy and then how to buy and improve. How to buy and improve is one of the most critical things for us, because you might imagine that in sourcing a lot of different things for a grocery store, you may want a long-term contract, right? You're probably not going to sell anything other than Kroger brand and Clorox brand wipes in your store for probably the next 4 or 5 years. So you might want to have a long-term agreement. But in that long-term agreement, you may want to structure some things that are leading you to cost savings on an annual basis. So you may want to make sure that their packaging teams are very efficient in looking at packaging opportunities. You may want to take a look at how the product gets to you in the supply chain. You may want to take a look at payment terms. All those things can be built into how to buy and improve. Then we build our RFP and create our sourcing event. Really, that is when you determine the number of suppliers, let's say 5 different suppliers, and you use their RFI information and your clean sheet to determine how best to negotiate. And that's when you get into category number 4, which is conducting your RFP. And it's interesting. Someone was asking me, well, why can't you just do everything in one round of RFP? Well, sometimes it takes a little bit of finesse, and sometimes it takes a little bit of knowledge to be able to conduct an RFP. By this, I mean, you may pit 2 suppliers against each other, and then in the next round, you take the best of them and pit them against a 3rd supplier. It just really depends upon the situation and how you're going to do that. Then you receive the supplier bids and conduct the RFP analysis and give the suppliers feedback. In the case of the paper suppliers that we talked to, one of the pieces of feedback that we gave to the one supplier was, why is your OEE 20 points behind your competition? So you give them the opportunity to respond to that. And you may also, during that process, help them drive to a better conclusion, or help them determine that they need to do continuous improvement to be able to improve their capability. Then number 5 is my favorite part. As you may imagine, doing this for a long time, it's conducting in-person negotiation and finalizing awards. So it drives my wife absolutely nuts, but I will negotiate everything. As an example, I'm looking at a refrigerator that I negotiated. You might think you go into Best Buy, and if the refrigerator says it's going to be $1,800, you pay $1,800. I think mine was $1,898. I paid $1,798, and I got a free warranty. So one of my favorite books out there is called You Can Negotiate Anything, and it's absolutely true. You can negotiate what you have for dinner tonight. You can negotiate a refrigerator. It really doesn't make any difference. But what really sets you apart from your competition is knowing the cost base. And I'll go all the way back to number 1, and that's building the category fact base. Knowing and understanding the cost better than the salesperson. So when I went into Best Buy, I happened to know the person from GE that worked for the refrigerator company, and I kind of knew what the price was to manufacture that, right? So it didn't come with just walking in and negotiating. So I had to do my homework a little bit. And I knew that there was $300 worth of margin into that product. So some of that had to go to cover logistics cost, et cetera. But some of it had to also cover warranty cost. So the salesperson knew what their kind of least acceptable alternative was to making the sale or not. But conducting those in-person negotiations with key suppliers and developing the award scenarios is probably the most rewarding thing, because it's really when you can see the hard work that you put into, number one, and number two, in developing that very qualified RFI and RFP. It's really when you see the results of that. And that makes a huge difference. But I will also tell you right now that there are some things that come into play in market analyses that really create different negotiation alternatives. And I'll give you two perfect examples right now because of COVID. So one of the industries that's hurting dramatically, which we never, ever had leverage against, was travel. So whether it be the airlines, the hotels, you might get down to $98 versus $97, Hilton versus Marriott in a certain geography. Well, there couldn't be a better time to negotiate travel than right now. So that's why we have pulled up our travel agreements to negotiate them right now. Another perfect example is marketing, right? So when we went into 2020, we're thinking the best we could do was maybe hold prices on marketing spend, or maybe just shave off a little bit. Well, that's dramatically changed. So what has changed? The Olympics are no longer going to go on this year. So a great time to negotiate. The presidential elections and the regional elections have been relegated to basically write-in candidates or absentee balloting. So that has diminished dramatically. If you look at a lot of the ads that were on there, I can't tell you the last time I saw an Applebee's or a TGI Friday commercial on the news, because basically they don't have any market share right now and they're in a difficult time. So an absolutely perfect time to analyze all of your indirect spend and look for opportunities that are driven by the current crisis to create that opportunity for you. And then chevron number 6 is transitioning to new suppliers and SKUs. So this one I cannot emphasize enough. And in the retail business, it is much more important than others. But conducting very thorough implementation plans and DTV plans. Let's say you're going to convert from glass to plastic, as I mentioned in that salad dressing example. Well, glass takes up a little bit more space than plastic. Plastic, you can get a thinner product than you can on glass. So you need to make sure that you work with your merchants, et cetera, to make sure that you've analyzed and understand all the implications that will be driven by launching a new supplier or a new product. Then you have to track and measure what you do. It's an unfortunate thing that all of us on the sourcing side need to do, but we need to track and measure savings to make sure that we actually get what we thought we were going to get. Believe it or not, people make mistakes, and some people might make a mistake on a price sheet, might not implement the price that you've given, might do that on purpose. Not that I know that for a fact, but I think there might be some. And making sure that you get the appropriate impact that the business and you have expected. And then transitioning the products, as I said, if it's an existing product, but I'll give you a perfect example. So Kroger is in the process of converting over to American Greetings from Hallmark cards. That you might think that, oh, that's pretty simple. You just go in and put the new cards in the old card area. But there are different cards. There are different sizes of cards. One supplier might have 6 feet of Mother's Day cards. One supplier might have 8 feet of Mother's Day cards. So a tremendous effort, which we have kind of put on pause until the June timeframe, mainly because of coronavirus. You didn't want a lot of people in the stores disrupting the aisle, if you will, that all of those greeting cards go into when you've got people in there fighting for volume. And by the way, if you ever want to know what category is recession proof, depression proof, and pandemic proof, it's grocery. We're up 35% year to date. It's just been crazy. So our digital business has gone kind of crazy off of the charts right now. So you've got all these digital carts running around. Well, you don't want somebody disrupting that aisle during that time. And you're more than covering the sales opportunity that you would have seen in that case. So that's another example of where coronavirus is impacting our business. And with that, Chris, I'll kind of take a pause. I should have told the group up front, go ahead and ask questions during, but hopefully everybody cataloged some questions to ask on the process. But really, it's meant to be an open dialogue, and not every business is the same. So I've worked in the food processing business. I've worked in the hard parts automotive business. I've worked in the chemicals business, which is what Goodyear is. Tires are basically just a big bunch of chemistry and chemicals. And now in the retail industry, some things are the same. Floor care is floor care is floor care. But selling a bottle of salad dressing is a little bit different than selling a tire or selling a truck transmission. Let me assure you. So with that, Chris or anybody, if you have any questions, and please focus in on the pandemic. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. Although, as I explained, we're up 35% year to date. Most of our time is spent trying to find product to put on our shelves. But it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, that sounds great. Sounds great. Thank you very much, Mark, for this information. I would like to start with perhaps some basic questions for you. Do you have a headquarter and the complete team in the headquarter attending the entire group? How it works? And I mean, behind the scenes, how is the group? How many people do you have, and in the purchasing strategic sourcing area?
Yeah. So our demand managers and the people who order product are different. And so I'll just speak to the sourcing organization.
Mm-hmm.
We have about 200 people. They're all, almost all located in Cincinnati, downtown, and in Blue Ash. Blue Ash because that's where our KTD, Kroger technology and digital is headquartered. And then we have about 15 people out at Portland. Portland, because that's where our general merchandise is sourced. A lot of that comes from overseas, and that team is just much closer, much easier to get to. But I think the essence of your question is, how are we working kind of during the crisis? Everybody's working from at home. And it's interesting. We haven't missed a beat. And by that, I mean, we haven't missed a savings target, a meeting, anything. We use Microsoft Teams, and everybody is just working from home. As I mentioned, we had 2 supplier meetings today. They had 2 yesterday, and everybody just calls in and makes it work. So the ability to come into an office has kind of been minimized a little bit. Did I answer your question, Chris?
Yeah. And one of the concerns to get a kind of a home office, usually organizations have, is to, keep confidentiality or compliance issues. And I think that this scenario impacted this mindset dramatically as well, because you can keep also the compliance for the process, even if the person is not in the same building, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. So I've got a couple of different perspectives on that. Number one is I am absolutely pleasantly surprised that the digital chain hasn't been broken. I mean, we basically have, I think, 2,200 people in downtown and probably another 2,000 out in Blue Ash. And I would say 95 to 98% of these people went home. Now, luckily, almost everybody had a laptop. So that was great because, oh my God, we have so many levels of security that you wouldn't believe. So you have to go into the VPN and do all these different things. But I'm absolutely amazed in a positive way how the digital supply chain has not fallen down. We live very far out. We live almost in Mount Orab. So I know you're new to the area, Chris, but if you follow 275 around to the east side and then go 15 miles east of that, that's where we live. But not one person, I mean, maybe once every couple of days, you hear maybe someone having some issue with their video or something like that. But right now, our video is perfect. I can see you well. You can see me well.
Mm-hmm.
The whole supply chain here, and in addition to that, it's not just the businesses. So my father's 96. He lives over in Erlanger by the airport, and we have a Skype meeting. No, not a Skype. Well, maybe it is a Zoom meeting. I think it is a Zoom meeting that my niece in Connecticut organizes every Saturday so that he can see all of his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren and have dialogue with every day. It's just absolutely amazing that this country's infrastructure was built for so much more than we're using.
That's great. That's great. I'm going to open to our group for questions. Would like to make some questions? You can raise your hand. You can join us.
Okay, come on. Nobody be shy. Fernando, you're first up.
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
So you were talking about the negotiation part, and I was very interested about how does power related to if you negotiate with a company like P&G, or if you negotiate with a company, a very small supplier, a new one, how does power come to the balance when you negotiate a sourcing?
Yeah. Well, again, it all gets down to collecting the information in the RFI. A really good should cost or clean sheet cost model has about 29 or 30 different aspects to it. So who is buying the freight the best? Who receives the best? Who has the lowest labor cost, et cetera. So understanding each one of those elements is very important. Now, you bring up a very good point, which is sometimes you have a small supplier that they're your highest margin opportunity. So let's try to take, well, my favorite one, salad dressings. You know, you can make salad dressings probably 25 different ways, and you've got the Newmans, you've got the Hidden Valleys, and you've got the small regional players. People's preferences are really a key differentiator in smaller versus larger players in the marketplace. So you might have a small regional player, or somebody might choose Newman's, right? They choose Newman's because of their social responsibility, of where they put their profits, et cetera. So you may have different categories there that you want to negotiate off of what we call penny profit, right? The grocery business is not known for huge margins like truck transmissions or car tires, but you know, you're negotiating off of pennies. So if you have a supplier, now I'll give you a perfect example without sharing who it is. We have some suppliers of salad dressings who supply their salad dressings in glass jars, most expensive, with a metal top, most expensive, with a huge label, most expensive, and we make higher margin on them than we do on someone else who is very efficient, very effective, but they sell very well, mainly because someone is willing to come in and pay $3.99 for a salad dressing versus $1.99 on what we would call the big box or the very popular salad dressings. So really it just depends. But knowing that cost and being able to negotiate with the supplier on knowing what their target is. Now, this is one of the things that I didn't talk about, and it's knowing what their targets are as well. Now, you can get that in a couple of different ways. If they're a public corporation, you can get the information through public means, meaning you can understand what their target margin is. You can go to their press releases, do some research there. If they're a privately held company, a lot of what we do is called expert interviews. And if you don't know what an expert interview is, basically there are companies that are out there, Alpha Insights, Coleman Research, Garrison Lehrman, that they keep on file a list of experts. Believe it or not, I'm an expert for the tire industry. So I will occasionally get a call on, well, how does this market work on carbon black or something in the tire industry? And that's the way you get information on privately held companies, is by expert interviews from retirees that don't have a confidentiality agreement, or et cetera. And almost all these companies do a very good job of researching whether or not someone has a confidentiality agreement, and they sign off on a legal agreement, but they can provide great information. And you know, it's the better companies that I would tell you that do a confidentiality agreement that says you cannot provide any non-public information. There are some companies that are out there, believe it or not, Fortune 500 companies that don't hold any of their employees to a higher standard. And a lot of that is kind of left up to chance, if you will. But there are many different ways to get to what the cost is on a high versus a low margin product, and on a public versus a private company. Answer your question?
Yeah, very much. Thank you, Mark. I have more questions that I will ask later on. I will just let
Okay,
other people make their question. Thank you very much.
pleasure.
Someone else would like to make some questions? Comba, Jason, Audrey, Megan, Hala, Alex, Robert.
Come on, I'm gonna call you one by one if you don't. So next is Kumba.
Oh, you know Comba very well.
I know. I know.
I'm,
Now you're gonna ask me a tough question, so that's why I want to deck it early.
I'm still thinking about a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me help you while you're thinking. I'm gonna help you in one point. Mark, you said that your strategy and now exactly in this period of time is a very good moment for rationalization, SKU rationalization.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about, in one side, perhaps you have suppliers that would like to increase diversity or variety of products or flavors, and marketing guys, they are so shiny, they would like to discover everything and grasp a lot of opportunities. And in the other side is an operational challenge to manage so many items, so many complex. How do you balance that? I believe that the most complicated guys should be perhaps the biggest one. Can you influence them to decrease the number of SKUs?
Yeah.
How do you share that?
Well, it's unbelievable. We really rationalize it. So the one benefit that Kroger has that almost no other company has is we also own a company called 84.51, 84.51, which are the original GPS coordinates of the first Kroger store. And so we own our own market research company. So we can tell who is a very price sensitive shopper, least price sensitive shopper, a splurge and save shopper, etc. And we can ascertain what sells best through our stores. So quite honestly, Chris, one of the things that we've done is just said, hey, if you do 10 products for us in a week, that means if we cut it down to just 2 products, we're going to eliminate 7 changeovers. And those 7 changeovers, and this is where knowing your cost really comes into play. It's knowing your changeover cost and the changeover time. So as an example, we rationalized a supplier who shall remain nameless, who had 10 products and went down to only 2 products and saved ourselves 7 times 250 cases per week, because 250 cases per week is what we lost in a changeover. So, 17,500 cases or whatever, if my math was correct. So that's what you gain by having that. And I can tell you, because I went to the stores myself, there were a lot of holes on the shelf, especially throughout March. Probably less so in April, because we did that rationalization and told suppliers. But a lot of the suppliers kind of came to us and said, if you eliminate these 7 SKUs or 8 SKUs, you'll eliminate 7 changeovers. So what will really be interesting is what happens when the volume comes back down. So we believe that, and we may be wrong in this assumption, but we were selling somewhere around 3% above the prior year on a day-to-day basis. We believe that the new normal, at least until September when people go back to school, will be 20% to 25% difference. So we will be dealing with this for a long period of time, but that'll also give us the opportunity to spend the time to validate. What we're doing right now is validating whether or not those products will be meaningful for us to carry forward. By that, I mean, let's say a customer or a supplier used to sell us 10 products. Well, we can probably get away with 6 because we can increase the shelf space by 2 feet on that one, take another supplier who was selling 10 products, increase the shelf space by 6, and between the two, instead of 20, we can go to 14 products and actually sell more of the same product. But what we're also doing is doing a margin analysis. So, back to my example, lemon scented wipes might, you might be able to get more margin for them, 2 cents more per package than you would a regular non or unscented wipe. So we're going through that analysis, but it will be interesting to see. And you ask a very good question. One that we've been dealing with is, what do customers do when it comes back to it? Do they really need lemon, poppy seed, Parmesan dressing, right? Or can they just deal with Parmesan dressing and lemon poppy seed? So a lot of that analysis is going on right now as we're going through this. But you have a certain amount of space in the store. So we measure it by linear shelving feet. And you know that in the HBC or the health and beauty care area, you've got 220 feet and you have to take up 220 feet of space because you can't have any of that empty. So a lot of analysis is going on right now during the crisis to be able to ascertain, what do you really need? So it'll be interesting because we had never experienced anything like this, right? So we talk about what we call snow volume, right? When there's going to be a giant snowstorm, everybody goes and buys everything out, and the store is left devastated. Well, this snowstorm has gone on for 6 weeks. 7, 8 weeks in some cases. So trying to ascertain what that will be is a big task for us.
Well done. So thank you for
Yep.
answer. Anyone would like to make a question to Mark?
Come on, Fernando. You said you had more than one question.
Yes, I have one more related to new technologies.
Yes.
I don't know whether Kruger is already thinking about technologies such as blockchain, artificial intelligence, and I've been reading materials about blockchain technology, and that is still in a pilot test implementation phase. And I've seen that a lot of companies, the big issue is to information transparency. And I would like you to develop, to expand in this point in terms of what Kruger is thinking about these kind of new technologies and the transparency point across a supply chain.
Yep. So we are part of an industry leadership group on blockchain. So we are working with Walmart, Walgreens, Target. I forget the other 2 stores, but there's like 5 stores that are working on blockchain technology, because one of the worst things that we can do is develop the Kroger blockchain methodology. And then you have the Walmart blockchain methodology. Then you'll have the Target or the Walgreens blockchain methodology. So what we're trying to do is come up with an industry standard so that everyone can work to that. It took, believe it or not, and most of you are too young to remember this, but back in the 70s and 80s, just to get to UPC codes, took a Herculean effort on the retailers' parts to get to agreement on what we call G10s and UPC codes. So we're trying to develop what that industry standard will be. One of the biggest things that has changed for our business has been the digital business. So if you could imagine, last year, I think we did, I'm going to say $6,580,000,000 worth of digital business. This year it'll be easily over 10. Because, and we call anything digital, basically anything where a customer orders product on an app that is picked up outside of our four walls or delivered. So you can order on an app and still go into the store and pick it up. But you can also order on the app and do Kroger grocery pickup, which you drive up, you get in the lane, they come out and deliver groceries into your car. We do what we call Kroger grocery delivery, which is groceries delivered to your home via a partnership with Instacart. We have a digital solution on what we call ambient products, so things that aren't refrigerated or frozen. So as long as it's, like canned tuna fish and salad dressing, et cetera, and doesn't require refrigeration or freezing, that can be delivered to you. But one of the coolest things that we have going, and I am most proud of this, is we started this in Scottsdale, Arizona, and now have it in Houston, Texas. We are testing automated delivery. So I would encourage everyone on the call to look up Nuro, N-U-R-O vehicles. I think it's neurovehicles.com. And you can see the videos of Kroger groceries being delivered to a home via an autonomous vehicle. And knock on wood, we have not had one accident yet, so a little bit better than the G people as far as grocery deliveries. So we're testing. The reason we started in Scottsdale is they basically don't incur any inclement weather with the exception of rain. The reason we moved to Houston is they experience ice storms and they experience extreme heat. So we're trying to ascertain how that will go for us. But basically, what you'll see if you go to the website is you'll see basically you get a 4-digit code. You go up and you poke in your 4-digit code, and they deliver groceries. Literally, it will come up on your sidewalk if you live on an area with a sidewalk and come within 20 yards of your house. So that's one of the things that will change our business forever. And the other one that you mentioned was AI. We are using automated intelligence. We've got some tests going on right now, as do some other retailers, to do stock keeping or stock checking. So if you can imagine, you've got this vertical robot that comes down the aisle. It looks and it says, okay, normally that soup should come 2 feet away from me. I'm going 2 feet 6 inches, so I know I need to order 2 cans of, and it will read that shelf tag as well. So that's where we are applying artificial intelligence. The other one is floor care. And interestingly enough, you'll see that floor care in some Kroger stores. So if you go over to the Latonia Kroger store in Northern Kentucky, you'll see that all of those floors are being cleaned by robots. Basically, giant Roomba, is that the brand, I think, that they clean all the stores or the store over there entirely with robots. So we're deploying that as well. And as long as you do that during off shifts or on third shift, it can move around a stock keeper, et cetera, to sweep the floors. So we're trying to do as much. That's why we have almost 2,500 people, I think, out in Blue Ash. So Kroger Technology and Digital is a huge business for us. So when you go into a Kroger store, look up, and what you'll see is a little bulb that monitors basically everything that goes across the scanner, especially what we call the SCOs, the self-checkout area, to make sure that what goes across the scanner is actually what was put there. And I could probably spend 2 hours talking about the Kroger Technology and Digital, but that's exploded for us during the whole pandemic crisis, because people don't want to go to the stores if they can just order online and pick up. Now, what it has caused is, used to be you could order in the morning and pick up in the evening. Now that's lengthened out to 3 days, because that portion of the business has grown so dramatically. We haven't been able to keep up with it because we didn't expect it to go tenfold overnight, but literally it has gone tenfold overnight.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Pleasure. Uh-oh. Kumba has a question. I can
Yes,
tell.
I'm ready.
All right.
Well, thank you for this presentation. I'm not sure if my question is going to be off topic or anything, but I'm just curious about it. So since the pandemic, we have seen that there has been like a shortage of, for example, toilet paper at Kroger stores. So how does Kroger or your suppliers are managing the situation, and do the terms of the contract, the initial contract, still apply? For example, the bargaining situation, do you have to rearrange it? Or, and did Kroger already have some sort of sourcing emergency plan for situations like this? If so, is the plan followed point to point, or are you guys just freestyling right now through the situation?
Yeah. Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say there was not some freestyling. So most of our agreements are plus or minus 5% or plus or minus 10%. So in other words, if your volume increases 5% or 10%, the supplier has to supply you. That's by contractual agreement. The problem is the volume has gone up 35%. So really, and I was not kidding. I don't know who had joined and was listening to myself and Chris talk, but I'm on 4, 5, 6 calls. I think Thursday there's 6 calls on coronavirus, and they're all supply related. So as you can imagine, Kroger employees are encouraged to wear masks. So we've had to increase our mask purchases 7 times, 7x what that capability was previously. But let's talk toilet paper, right? Since you brought that one up, and that's a very good example. Those were the 2 calls that I was on yesterday and today. So we have basically 2 key suppliers. One supplier has increased our allocation to 200%. Now, I can only tell you that the only way they will have done that is to do what we call throwing someone else off the boat. So they may take a smaller player or one that would cause more changeovers, et cetera, or whatever, and throw them off the boat. Another supplier has guaranteed us 167% allocation going forward. Now, granted, that took some time to develop. So they didn't go to 200 and 167 right off the bat. It took a little bit of time for them to finesse and work through that. But that's why we have agreements. That's why we have contracts. Is the better the contract and the better supplier relationship you have, the better the opportunity for that to come together and to make sure that suppliers can work with you to make sure that you can get more incremental volume should you need it. But we have some suppliers, pasta as an example. We're getting more toilet paper than we are pasta right now. And our pasta allocation is basically down to about 82%. And a lot of that is because there's growing season, right? If you think about toilet paper, regardless, there's enough capacity around the world to go get paper to make toilet paper 24/7, 365. But let's take pasta. Pasta comes from wheat. Wheat is mainly grown in the Northern Hemisphere. The Northern Hemisphere's growing season is just beginning. So we're living off of the volume that was from the previous year's growing season. So we're living off of old volume. So it really, that's why we have so many calls every day, is to deal with the individual categories, because everyone has a story. Fruit, vegetables, pasta, they're all growing season products. So they're all difficult. Things like toilet paper and paper towels, why people are hoarding them, I don't know. Our CEO, in fact, I forgot to mention that. Between 7 a.m. and 7:45 tomorrow, Kroger's CEO, Rodney McMullen, will be on Good Morning America talking about that. And I'm sure one of the things, at least I hope one of these things that he brings up is there's no shortage of toilet paper in the U.S. But a lot of it comes from hoarding, right? So people are hoarding pasta. People are hoarding toilet paper because they perceive, rightly or wrongly, that the pandemic may keep them at home for a longer period of time. But let's also kind of take a look at what's going on in the marketplace. So this is the one thing that continues to drive me crazy, is the farmers talking about, we're throwing away cream for milk and throwing away this. I don't understand that, because there's the same amount of people in the United States as there was when COVID started. They're eating at home, which means they're going to the grocery store more now than they had previously. Even when the restrictions come off, people, like mine and my wife's habits, we went out once a week. We may go out once a month now. So all of that food service item, that's why if you go to some Kroger stores right now, you'll see food service items in black and white bags with a scanner code on it that says frozen fruit, frozen vegetables, because we've had to take some of that volume because customers have demanded it, and it has switched from food service to retail. So a lot of those things are changing, and that's why we believe that this kind of impact will be 20 to 25% through the summer months, because even until kids go back to school, people will still be a little skittish about going to food service to get food service product. But all those, if you went to the restroom when you were going out to Applebee's or TGI Fridays or whatever, you're eating that at home now, and you're using the restroom at home. So that's where a lot of those products get consumed. Did I answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, wonderful. Actually, Mark, we have so many topics to talk about, but I think we are just in the time right now.
Okay.
But I really would like to thank you so much for your time. I just would like to make sure that anyone else would like to make any questions. If you have, say now or never. Okay. So thank you so much for your time. It was
Pleasure.
amazing for us to get you. And best wishes for you in your new challenge. Hope you enjoy your home office timing over there.
I'm loving it. I get to see my wife and grandchildren every day, so it's all good. And anytime you need me, Chris, just give me a call.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark.
Okay.
And thank you guys very much for your time. I do hope you enjoyed this presentation as well. If you'd like to send perhaps later on some questions, let me know. I can forward to Mark as well.
Please.
Okay.